I know you heard me on the radio. Flexing, she loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K. I know you heard me on the radio. Flexing, she loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K. Welcome to another episode of Phin-Addict Fury. Guys, before I even go any further, I just want to say, there's been so many people watching the channel, so many people showing love, so many people, commenting, liking, talking, sharing. That's awesome. I love all of it. But if you're passing through, if you're just an NFL fan, if you're a Dolphins fan, if you agree with me, if you don't agree with me, if you just like content, do me a favor. Just right below this video, just click and smash that subscribe button. Just give me a subscribe. I'm always putting out content, and, it's not going to hurt to have another football voice on your repertoire of YouTube content, because I'm always talking about the Dolphins, and I'm a bona fide Dolphins fan, but I'm also a football fan in general. We'll be talking a lot of football and other sports talk and whatnot on this channel. So if you haven't subscribed yet and you're passing through, and this is your second or third time watching a video, just consider hitting that subscribe button. It's really appreciated. Of course, as always, like the video, comment, whatever it is. It always gets engagement going, and it's a good thing for the channel, and it's a good thing that allows me to continue to make content for you guys. Special shout out to people, by the way, Paul Foster out in the UK, Will Waters, Zach Santola, Tori Day, Sean Lucas. These are people who actually found me on normal social media, which I am findable on, and kind of reached out and have been talking to me and engaging, and that's a dope thing too. I always welcome engagement with other Dolphins fans and people who just dig the channel. So anyway, Phin-Addict Fury. Yes, there's a weird thing to buy this microphone. Is because I'm in the middle of recording an album right now, a music album, and this kind of insulates the sound. So I apologize. There's a weird silver thing in the shot. But look, let's get down to business. This is the last time, at least, as far as dedicating an entire video to it. This is the last time I'm going to dedicate an entire video to this whole Flores fallout situation. I'll obviously continue talking about it and addressing it as news comes up and whatnot. But this is the last time I'm going to make a whole video about it. I'm going to say my piece, and that's going to be it. So first I'm going to kind of outline, based on some of the news stories and other things that have been going around, what seems to, at least according to the rumor mill and the media, what seems to have happened in this situation and what seems to have gone down here. And then I'm going to talk about where we are as a fan base and why certain people feel a certain way and other people feel a different way, and yada, yada, yada. Look, David Hyde came out this week with an article that kind of went into the fact that there was some friction in the locker room. It appears that, Flores was a hard coach. He was a rough around the edges guy. One of the predominant stories out there is that during the Tennessee Titans game, when Tua obviously was playing terribly, that Flores during halftime said to Tua, I need some better effing play from the quarterback, or effing play better, something to that effect. And it might have gone on beyond that. It might have been more of a back and forth. Long story short, Flores said that. Long story short, apparently Tua said you can't talk to people that way to Flores, or he doesn't know how to talk to people, something along those lines. There was a big blow up. Tua was not happy about it. Tua's camp was not happy about it. And then apparently, Flores hadn't been working well with Greer, and et cetera, et cetera. So Ross heard about this. He heard that Flores was, tough to work with. So Ross stepped in and fired Flores. He made that executive decision, and now they're just out looking for coaches. All right. First of all, let's talk about that situation briefly. And I don't want to spend too much time because, let's be honest, none of us were in that locker room. So it's all speculation and, rumors and whatnot. But look, I have to think, based on the way Tua was acting in that game on the sideline, which was well documented, I have to think that there's some truth to that story, that there's some legs to that there's some reason that actually did take off in some way and people were mad about that. And I got to say this, look, I'm an attorney by trade, by the way. I'm an attorney, a lawyer by trade. And if I went into a courtroom on one of the biggest trial days of my life and I just completely fumbled literally and figuratively the case. And I couldn't execute simple questions, and I forgot certain strategy points, and I had a witness on the stand ready to answer the question as I planned it, and I fell short. I would hope and expect that when I went back for lunch, that my boss or my client would say, hey, I need better effing lawyering. And what I would not do would say, you can't talk to me that way. I'd say, shit, I really got to do better. You're right. I'm letting you down. So this new generation, it seems like, and by the way, I know plenty of people who are involved in coaching at higher levels in football, and I know people who are involved in education and people who deal with youth on a regular basis. And there is this sentiment out there that none of us can really deny, that our newer, younger generations of people don't take kindly to harsher criticisms, and everything has to constantly be this two-way street, holistic approach to everything, collaborative approach, to quote Stephen Ross. And I think, there's something to be said for maybe not always being so rigid and unilateral in the way that you approach leadership, of course. But there's something else to be said that, hey, this is a football team, okay? Football was developed as a strategy game and a brawn game in the trenches and mud and all weather that got young men ready for life and sometimes combat, because Army was one of the best football teams in the country right before wartime. Guys are getting ready to go to war. I mean, football is not for the faint of heart. It's a physical, tough sport. And if there's one place where saying, hey, effing play better should be acceptable once in a while, it's the football field and the football locker room. I'm sorry. Especially when the guy's playing so bad. He's dropping balls with no one around him. He's one-hopping first downs in a pivotal game, maybe the most important game of the season up to that point. So this idea that Flores was wrong for saying this, and the idea that Tua got his panties in a bunch and got all annoyed about it, and his handlers were mad about it to say something. I mean, I think it says a lot about the state we're in, in general, and I think it says something about Tua, to be honest with you, and I don't think it's a good thing. So anyway, now that the narrative, that's just one part of this overarching narrative. And I know people are like, well, there's a new time, you can't say that. Whatever. Stop with the game. Stop trying to placate all the nonsense that goes on. You don't have to agree with everything that happens in society. You don't have to go along with every commonly held belief as if it's infallible. Sometimes you can have an opinion that's contrary to where we're going or whatever, and it's okay, all right? You don't have to be cabined all the time. So what's going on now is very clear, right? If you don't think or you don't know that big organizations, whether it's a business, whether it's a football franchise, whether it's a news organization, whether it's a political campaign, if you don't know that those entities carefully plot their public, their publicity and their media interaction and their public relations, and that they don't have several public relations people consistently on staff, you are completely in the dark about how these things function. The Dolphins have decided that their publicity campaign, because when they fired Brian Flores, the backlash from football media, from football personnel in the league, from professionals associated with football in any capacity, was essentially shock. People were shocked that they fired Flores. They thought the Dolphins were a joke for doing so, because the Dolphins have been such a mediocre to bad franchise for 2 decades. And this guy finally gets us to some level of tough play, respectability, and back-to-back winning seasons, let alone sweeping the Patriots this year and sweeping 2 out of 3 of our division opponents and going 4-6 against the Patriots in 3 years. And I'm not trying to hype up the Patriots. I'm saying that's where our division is, so you want to go that way. Now, the Bills thing's another issue, but that's not really been addressed. But the Dolphins' strategy, and make no mistake, it was discussed, and there's a concerted effort to push that strategy through their various contacts in the media. Their strategy is to now put out this narrative that Brian Flores was really difficult to deal with. He was abrasive. No one liked him, etc., 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 etc. Now, you are an objective observer, right? You're a fan, you're a football person, you're just watching TV, you're watching the media, you're trying to figure out for yourself what happened here and why. Let's start with the fact that you have eyes, you have experience, and you have a general sensory perception of people and social interaction that you've built up over your life. So you can tell certain things for yourself without being fed narratives by the media or the Dolphins, right? As an example, do you remember watching Adam Gase after losses? Remember when Adam Gase would flat out blame the players for losses? Like, wow, the players, they got to execute. Like, he would just say that. And how Adam Gase would trade away anybody like Jay Ajayi who wanted to tweak something with the offense even when he was playing good. And how Adam Gase had a generally just like eye-rolling, all jokes aside with his eyes, just a dismissive personality with everybody. But not just the way Flores is, which is being quiet and not really wanting to elaborate too much. I mean, like a straight-up arrogant, like, you're dumb personality. We could see in his press conferences. We didn't have to be told that by anybody. We saw it. Do we remember Adam Gase's assistant doing a line of cocaine off a table and talking to whoever it was, a stripper, a prostitute, whatever it was, and then getting fired, but Gase staying? Like, do we remember? Like, the reason I bring up Gase is we could see with our own two eyes that Gase was an unlikable guy, that Gase certainly was abrasive in the locker room, that he was straight up throwing players under the bus in the locker room. He was showing us that he was an abrasive guy. It was hard to get along with. So we already knew he was. And if somebody had told us that after the fact, hey, Gase is abrasive, we would have understood. Because, like, yeah, we've seen that. We know, right? With Flores, yeah, you saw a gruff guy. You could bet that some players were tough, annoyed because he rode them pretty hard, because he worked them pretty hard, because he demanded excellence. You could see a guy who was like a quiet football guy, like a Bill Belichick, like a Shiano, like all these guys. Like Parcells used to be, like, just dialed in, doesn't want to elaborate too much, doesn't want to give away tactical advantages, just all about the business, all about the game. But you could also see a guy who, even though Tua flatly struggled, who, even though I don't think he was a huge fan of Tua, he always said, well, Tua's improved, he's our quarterback, he's developing, his leadership has improved. He never threw his players under the bus. And the guys kept playing hard for him right until the end, despite their struggles and despite the fact that their quarterback wasn't playing very well and their offense wasn't great. So now they're going to tell us that he was so abrasive, he was so hard to work with, there was so much wrong with him, and we are supposed to just believe it. We are supposed to just take that at face value and just agree with it, even though our two eyes didn't always say that. That's a problem. So I'm not saying he was or wasn't abrasive. I'm sure there's certain people he didn't get along with. I'm sure there were certain people he rubbed the wrong way. I'm sure he's a tough guy. But this is definitely a concerted narrative that the Dolphins are pushing out. This isn't because he was so difficult to work with. He was absolutely such a menace that the Dolphins had to get rid of him. No, they want you to believe that so that they cover their asses for probably a questionable decision. That's first of all. Second of all, what do I think happened here? Now, just remember, again, I wasn't there. This is just me piecing together what I think happened based on reading everything, piecing things together, and again, my own power of deduction, my own experiences with life, my own sociability, etc. It seems like, to me, pretty clear that when it was time to draft a quarterback in early 2020, that certain people in the Dolphins war room wanted Justin Herbert. And I'm sure there was consensus in the war room from owner down that they definitely would take Burrow. And they were trying to do everything they could to trade in to get Burrow, but they couldn't because Cincinnati smartly, because now they're in the playoffs doing well, smartly said, we're not trading out of the one position. We're not giving you Burrow no matter what you do. It's not happening. So now it came down to, are we going to go for Herbert or are we going to go for Tua? And there were certainly voices in that room that were pro-Herbert and certainly voices that were pro-Tua. Now, I've already talked about how the hype train and the mass hysterical, human phenomenon out there that takes root was all for Tua. Not because they'd all seen his high school and college tape and thought he was a brilliant play, signal caller. Not because he had the utmost amazing physical gifts. Not because he was durable, because he just came off a massive hip surgery and injury. Not for any of those reasons, just because there was a concerted hype train behind him that sometimes we don't even know the origins of, right? I think it might have started when he had the one championship in the national title game as a freshman. It might have carried him through there. then he's got like a cool image, he's got a cool name, it has a ring to it, and he just is a charismatic type individual, and there are people in this society that just flock to him for some reason. So there's this mass hysteria about tank for Tua. And then there's the guys in the nitty-gritty, and I'm sure some of them liked him, and some of them thought, he's got these issues, he's coming off the injury. Didn't execute these throws very well. He's shrunk in big moments. He's small. His hands are too small. There's a lot of things that I'm not sure about. His durability's in question. Anybody would have questioned these things that was looking into it, because everybody did, right? Even the analysts that thought he should be the pick still noted those concerns. And even us lay people who were at home watching, some of us really cared about those concerns, and at least those of us who wanted him still acknowledged those concerns. So people certainly knew of it and definitely brought it up in the conversation in every war room across the country, especially the Dolphins war room. Now, it's my opinion, based on everything we've seen, all the actions subsequently, everything we've seen beyond that, is that Brian Flores, an old school knock-around football guy, probably either wanted to get Herbert or wanted to go a completely different direction and try to see if they could acquire somebody in a trade or wait a year or whatever. He got Fitzpatrick to just carry the team because he was building the defense and he was trying to build other aspects of the team, and he needed a good, middle guy to carry the torch in between. Now, I'm trying to find a word that I can't find, so it is what it is. And I want to conduit. No, I don't know. Sometimes I stumble, as eloquent as I try to be. But look, so I think Flores wasn't a believer in Tua from the beginning. I do think that. I don't think he was completely against him. I think he just wasn't. He didn't believe that his skill set would work in the NFL. I don't know where Chris Greer was on it, and that's the mystery that I think will be with us for a long time until some kind of real expose or real story comes out that kind of discusses what actually went on in that war room. But I do think, and I am of the opinion, that Stephen Ross definitely wanted Tua. He wanted Tua because that's the kind of guy he is. The hype was there. He thought he could not draft somebody else. He couldn't bear the hype not being there. He couldn't bear the backlash from the mass hysteria and the fan base who, rightly or wrongly, and probably wrongly, was obsessed with the idea of Tua and how people would just lose their minds if he didn't draft Tua, and et cetera, et cetera. I think he was strongly pushing for that buzz, for that Tua mass hysteria. And he pushed for Tua. I don't know where Greer was. So anyway, they draft Tua. Now, I don't know what went on last year when Fitz had to sit for Tua. I don't know if that was Flores' decision to say, okay, you say he's got the goods. He's a superstar quarterback. The guys in the other teams are starting to play. He's got to play. He's got to show what he is. I don't know if Flores said the kid's making some good throws. I mean, we all look like he could make a couple throws when he first came in. And I think he's ready to go and he's better than Fitz. I don't know if that was what it was. And I don't know, lastly, if the front office, i.e. Greer and Ross, called down and said, it's time to start Tua. We got to see what we have in him, and he's ready to go, and let's get going. We got commercial advertisements lined up. We got everything going. The other guys are starting to play. We need to get our young stud in there, play him. And I don't know if Flores was down with the plan, yeah, no problem. Or if Flores was oh, I really don't want to do this, but fine. The reason I bring that up is when Fitzpatrick was benched, he's such a team guy, such a collaborator. He knew his role and everything, and yet he still was so upset about it and so surprised. That leads me to believe that inside the practice facility and inside the locker room, if Tua was such an upgrade over Fitzpatrick, I don't think he would have been so surprised. I don't think he would have taken it that way because he would have known that it was coming for a couple weeks. But his absolute surprise and the absolute way he was dejected and let down leads me to believe that that team, including the coaches and Coach Flores, knew he was not ready. That makes me believe maybe the start of this not collaborating, fighting, disagreements might have occurred then when the front office said start Tua and Flores said, but what about my team? My team is playoff bound. I have a good chemistry going where we're playing well. I don't know. And so I don't know how that shook out. But I also think when he benched Tua against the Raiders and he continued to bench him and flip-flop and put Fitzpatrick in and sit Tua, I bet the front office wasn't happy about that, and they probably butted heads there. They probably butted heads there too. So long story short, I think a lot of this disagreement and a lot of this not collaborating thing has something to do with the quarterback situation. I think it's inescapable to not put the two together. I really do. And there's only one way that's going to change, and I'll tell you about that in a few minutes. But so the ground started to fall out. But here's the other thing that happened, I think. I think this year, I think even the beginning of this year, I think Chris Grier and Flores, and probably even Ross, although I don't think Ross wanted to accept it, and I still don't think he wants to, I think they all realized, either last year or early this year, they all realized that we made a mistake with who we picked. Tua just doesn't have it. He's an okay quarterback, but he needs everything around him to be perfect to win. We thought we were getting a franchise-changing, generational talent, just excellent quarterback, and that's what we've wanted, and that's what Stephen Ross has longed for forever. I think all of them knew that they made a mistake. I think Grier and Flores together, or at least in agreement, even if they're not working together, came up with a plan to salvage them. Because remember, Ross hired Grier to run all football-related activities and operations. And Grier hired Flores. Not Ross. Ross was involved, but Grier was supposed to have full control of the football side of the team, and he went for Flores. He had prior connections with him from New England. He went for Flores. Their necks were on the line as a regime. Because I always tell you, it's GM, it's coach, it's quarterback. That's the regime. So they had a regime in place. And their collective necks were on the line because we were not looking like we had the potential to be a contender, especially with that weaker play at the quarterback position. And that's when he was playing. He started off getting hurt again, and he was out for a couple games, and that's another problem that's going to inhibit our ability to compete in the long term, his durability. Now, I understand that the offensive line was a problem, which got him hurt at Buffalo. I understand that. I'm not denying that. What I am saying, though, is that that's also part of the problem, right? Flores didn't hire a very good O-line coach. Flores did not have a good eye for the talent on the field when he reported to Grier who to get rid of and who to keep. Flores might not have developed the offensive lineman that we had, which was part of the problem. And Grier made some really bad picks. On the offensive line. So they were all in trouble. So I think they both came up with a plan that, hey, we can go out and we can get Deshaun Watson. And if we get Deshaun Watson is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's a top 5 quarterback. If we plug him in, even with this offensive line, but with the way this defense is playing and with his future potential, because he's a young quarterback still in his prime who's a top 5 guy, if we can get Deshaun Watson, we can save our asses. And we can tell Ross, hey, we messed up on the quarterback, but look at the whole rest of the team we built, and now we went out and got Watson. You have a lot to be excited about. Stay tuned. We're going to be a contender. Because almost all the teams that are contenders have an elite quarterback, and Deshaun Watson is an elite quarterback. That's on the field. I'm not going to talk about off the field because that's what complicated a lot of things. But I think Grier and Ross came to a collective decision that's how they're going to save their asses. Then the team just started sucking. Probably because of the distractions at quarterback. Probably because Tua was not very good when he did play. And when he didn't play, Brissett was not very good. Probably because of all kinds of other reasons. I don't know why the defense wasn't doing what they could. Omar Kelly reported that it was because they didn't have certain personnel available to them, which I'm inclined to believe, so maybe that contributed. I don't know. But they start losing. And not only do they start losing, but they get to the trade deadline. And when they get to the trade deadline, Grier has now come up with a package to get Watson, and Flores is all in on Watson. Flores knows if he doesn't get Watson or he doesn't get some other elite quarterback or quarterback that's more equipped to play in today's NFL, then he is not going to be able to compete. The trade deadline comes, and the Watson thing is a lot of assets to be given up. And this is where Stephen Ross comes in. And now, this is either going to look like a brilliant move if Watson goes down in flames for these alleged offenses, or it's going to look like one of the dumbest moves in NFL history, just like Drew Brees and Nick Saban, if he gets away and he settles all his things and he goes on to be a great quarterback in this league and maybe win a championship with another team. It's going to look really stupid. We don't know yet. But long story short, Ross came in, again, always concerned about the publicity. always concerned about the publicity. The Dolphins fans, for some reason, now maybe not the majority of people who listen to my channel, maybe not the majority of people who listen to TD's channel, maybe not the majority of people who are just objective and have now adjusted their beliefs after seeing 2 years of Tua. But there is a big contingent of Dolphins fans. I don't know if it's a majority or not, but there's a large group of Dolphins fans who would go crazy in anger if we were to get rid of Tua for Watson. And many of them cling to the allegations. I think some of them really believe the allegations and they hate Watson because of the allegations. But I think other ones just use the allegations to further find a reason not to get rid of Tua because they just love Tua so much. Whatever the reason, there was going to be a big public outcry. And then you had these groups that were going to protest. And Ross was very concerned about the publicity. He's always concerned more about the publicity. Ross is always concerned more about what goes on outside the stadium than what he is what goes inside the stadium and on the field. That's why he's not a good owner. But we'll get to more of that in a minute. Ross was concerned about the publicity. So he tried to push Watson to settle all his lawsuits, even though Watson initially didn't want to because he was proclaiming his innocence. He wanted to go to the Dolphins. He wanted to play ball, so he tried to do it. And then he failed. He couldn't get 4 of the women to settle, so it didn't happen. Now, interestingly, everybody's forgetting about this little story, but it was reported by the women's lawyers that Stephen Ross was meddling in the lawsuits and that Stephen Ross was acting improperly in trying to push these women to settle and trying to influence the system with Watson and the women. And everybody kind of pushed that under the rug, but that was Stephen Ross. Again, rumor had it, he was acting improperly, inappropriately, and trying to push those settlements. But long story short, Grier and Flores had the deal in place. The Texans had agreed to it, but because of the publicity, because Watson couldn't get all the lawsuits settled, Ross backed out. It was Ross who said no. At the last minute, it was Ross. Now, I believe right at that point is where the Grier snakeism came in. Grier became a complete snake after that, I think, because all of a sudden, Big O, which it seems from listening to all these media sources, seems like these South Florida media guys seem to think, based on what they're saying and beating around the bush, Joe Shad said it, Skolnick said, do you know? Big O starts going hard on defending Grier and going at Flores. Destroying Flores, defending Grier, and we know Big O's a 2-and-ear. He's 2-and-on president. And these media guys seem to be insinuating on some of their little talk and videos and releases that Big O might have a connection or a leak from the Grier camp. So all of a sudden, it's flow. I think Grier knew once Watson didn't happen, he knew they were in trouble. Because he knew Tua's not the guy. It's going to be hard to make the playoffs, and I don't have anything to offer anymore. And I know my coach is not going to stop sounding the alarm. My coach is going to say at the end of this year to the owner, hey, this guy made some questionable picks on the O-line, and this guy picked the wrong quarterback, and you, Mr. Ross, picked the wrong quarterback, and I can't win with him, and we got to recalibrate. And for all we know, I don't know if it's true. Maybe Flores was like, well, I have a better GM in mind who could make better picks or go get me the quarterback I want. I don't know. But long story short, Grier knew they were in trouble once they didn't get Watson, and Grier started the campaign to cover his ass and scapegoat Flores. And if Ross wants to believe in Tua because Tuanon and all these other people that comment on my videos screaming at me and calling me names and calling me a loser and everything because I don't like Tua because it's subjective, you can just tell he's not great. All these people, he wanted to satisfy them and he wanted to believe himself because Ross is he's a typical fan and he's an ignorant fan. So he's one of these people who just wants to believe in Tua anyway. If Grier could sell Ross on, hey, just let me get another coach. The real problem is that Flores is hard to work with. He doesn't get along with Tua. If I can get a guy who gets along with Tua, I think we can salvage this. Mr. Ross. That was his way of saving his own ass. I think Chris Grier was trying to save his own ass, and he started that campaign to get rid of Flores. And it worked. It worked because Ross wants to believe that Tua's the guy. And basically, all it does is buy Grier another 2 years, 3 years max. So now here we are. The team, Mr. Ross, basically has essentially chosen Tua over Flores. That's the decision they made. They said, see you later, Flores. We're going to bring in somebody who's going to work with Tua. Now, like I told you before about the publicity thing, don't believe the lies, right? Don't believe the hype. I could be, and I'll be wrong if somebody comes in and Tua is gone. But I don't believe that, right? Don't believe the hype that they're going to find the best coach available, and whatever that coach wants to do with Tua, they'll listen and they'll do it. Don't buy that. That's not what's happening. That's BS. That's complete crap. They are trying to find a coach who, in that interview room, any coach that goes into that interview room and says, I don't like Tua, I don't think I can work with him, they're going to say, next. They're saying they're going to hire the best guy, but to them, the best guy is going to be the guy that sits in that chair and says, I like Tua. I can work with Tua. Here's all the things I'm going to do with Tua. I'm going to make Tua great. So their plan is not to find the best guy and let him make a decision on Tua. Their plan is to find somebody who's going to say they can make Tua really good. And another thing is, make no mistake, star players in this league, you saw it with Xavier Howard demanding a trade early in the year, even though he's under contract. Make no mistake, star players have a lot of power, even if they're under contract. So Tua's camp, Tua's handlers, his agent, his parents, whoever else, Tua's handlers, they had a say too, okay? They're all at the table. They're at the table too. Not literally, but figuratively. They're in contact. And they're saying, get Flores out of here. He doesn't believe in my guy. Get him out and get him somebody who he's comfortable with. So now they're blaming Flores and all that. One other thing I want to touch on in the past, going backwards, is the offensive staff. I did a video a few weeks ago where I said, controversial takes in the Dolphins. I thought they should keep George Godsey. Flores gets a lot of heat for his offensive hires, and rightfully so. They weren't great. I'm not going to say they were. I was unhappy about them. I still think they were questionable. You should have got an alpha guy. But let's not forget that Chan Gailey left. And again, it gets swept away. No one talks about it anymore. But a lot of the early rumors and talk was Chan Gailey left because he couldn't work with Tua. Tua didn't know the playbook, who he said himself. Tua had limitations. Chan Gailey wanted to work with a Fitz-type quarterback. I think Chan Gailey got his ass out of there before shit hit the fan because I think he knew his quarterback had severe limitations. Chan Gailey was out. And I don't know which offensive coordinator was willing to come here. We could put it all on Flores' ego. But what if he couldn't get candidates to come in because they didn't believe in Tua and they weren't going to hitch their wagon to a quarterback like that? Like if you have a good upswing as an offensive coordinator and you're a sought-after name, why would you come in with a quarterback who's going to make you look bad and then you're going to lose all your steam and you're not going to get an offer for a head coach? Why would you do that? How do we know that part of the problem was in Tua and not Flores? But anyway, he brings in Godsey, and Godsey does what he has to do. He calls a limited RPO, short passing game offense to accommodate Tua, to accommodate the O-line of deficiencies, and to accommodate the lack of a running game. He does it, and he does it almost masterfully. He mostly keeps Tua out of trouble until he really needed him to play, and then Tua was terrible. Mostly stops him from losing the game. He threw a couple touchdowns when needed. They use gimmicky plays when needed. They maximize the usage of Waddle because he's our best offensive player, and they tried their best to minimize Tua's mistakes, which he still sometimes got lucky, threw the ball into a defender's arms and it fell out, but whatever. He looked okay for 6 weeks, and I even said here, because I was objective, I said Tua was looking better. A lot of that was because of play calling. A lot of it was because Tua was able to execute the basic, easy offense. But right when it got hard, he couldn't do it anymore. So Flores gets a lot of flack for not hiring a good offensive staff, but I don't know that he hired the worst one for what it is. But Tua's camp wanted Flores out too, make no mistake. So now the Dolphins are going to go out and hire a coach. And as fans, I'm not angry. I'm not mad. I don't want anybody to take this. If you're a supporter of Tua, if you believe in him, that's fine. I hope you still listen to my channel. I'm going to stay with you till I can't do it anymore. Because I'm a Dolphins fan, for better or worse. Whether I like it or not, I'm a Dolphins fan, and that's that. But I think a lot of us want to believe in what's left rather than what's here, rather than what's gone, because we're fans, right? We can't get off the boat no matter what. We're not going to go follow Flores somewhere to another team. We're not going to go follow Ryan Tannehill to the Titans, even though Titans are a great team. We're not going to just switch teams because we're not front runners. We're fans. We'll never be able to divorce ourselves from being Dolphins fans. That's who we are. So we have no choice but to stay on the plane. If the plane's the Miami Dolphins, we got to stay there no matter what. So, of course, we want to believe that the guys we're left with, the pilots on that plane that we're left with, are the right ones. Because if they're not, if we really believe or acknowledge that the guys flying the plane are not capable of flying the plane, then we have to accept our own certain deaths. And that's not fun. So we want to believe they can fly it, right? Because the alternative is accepting our demise. So I understand why people don't want to acknowledge this. But here's the deal. Here's the situation. Flores was a guy who was not a yes man, right? And when you're a leader of an organization or you're a leader of anybody, you don't want yes men. People who tell you you're right no matter what you do, even if you're going to destroy yourself, are not good assets. People who tell you the hard truth, even though you don't want to hear it at first, are great assets. Like when I go car shopping, clothes shopping, whatever, I bring my sister, who I trust very well, because she tells me, I don't like that. And at first, I'm all excited. I'm like, you don't like it? I'm mad she doesn't like it. But in the long run, I'm like, thank God she told me, because she's telling me what I needed to hear, and I made a better decision later. Flores was not a yes man. Flores was telling him, dude, I know you like this kid. I know it's a lot of hype. I know you invested a lot, but I'm trying to tell you, this is not the way we're going to win. We got to change it up. And Ross didn't want to hear it, and Greer didn't want to hear it, and the fan base didn't want to hear it, so they sent him away. So if you're on that plane, Flores is the guy who's like, dude, you're not flying it properly. You're going to crash. We're going to die. You got to change the way you're driving it, okay? You got to change it, because this program or the pilot we're using, he's going to kill us. We can't do it this way. And some rich businessman in the back said, well, I don't care. I'm flying with this guy. I like him. Because the passenger's like, okay. And then Flores takes a parachute and jumps out of the plane. And he's gone. Now, some people are saying, good for him. He got off a sinking plane, a crashing plane. Of course, the fans want to believe, this is fine. We got the right guy on the plane, right? Right? Of course they want to believe that, because they're in the plane. They can't get off now. Flores jumped off in the parachute. And now we got a guy who's going to come in. And we got to trust the guy we got to trust to hire the right pilot to save our lives is Stephen Ross. And here's the thing. You can believe all you want that Stephen Ross is great. He's going to pick the right guy. But remember I told you about Adam Gase? Remember what we knew about Adam Gase? Remember how we could already tell he was a failure? He didn't get along? We could see with our own eyes. Again, we don't need a narrative. Why do we know that Adam Gase... You know, right? If I asked you right now, was Adam Gase a good coach? You'd be like, no. Why would you ask me that? Adam Gase was a terrible coach. We all know that. Okay. Why do you know it? Well, because his mannerisms, the way he failed with the Jets, the way he failed with the Dolphins, the way he just hitched his ladder to Peyton Manning. We have evidence of why Adam Gase sucked. We know he sucked. If I asked you if Joe Philbin sucked, you'd laugh. You'd be like, yeah. Remember the guy picking up gum wrappers and all that? The guy who went on a slide, whose team stopped believing in him, who barely knew what he was doing half the time, and Darren Rizzi was basically running the team? Yeah, we know he sucked, okay? Because you have evidence, right? You've seen him fail. That's why you know he sucked. Well, now I'm going to ask you, is Stephen Ross going to get this hire right? Is he a good owner? You know the answer. You know the answer. You might not want to believe it, but you know the answer. The answer is no. Stephen Ross sucks. He's not going to make the right hire. He's never made... Even if you believe Flores was bad, then you still must believe Ross sucks, because then he hired Greer, who hired Flores, and he let it happen. So it's another bad hire. I think it was a good hire by Greer. But even if you think it was bad, it just goes to more evidence that Ross is terrible and he's going to screw it up again, because all we've seen is him screw it up. And remember this about Ross, guys. I want to tell you something about Ross. First of all, Skolnick said this the other day, and it was great. It made me laugh because it's true. Like, it's so true. We didn't even think about it. It's like Stephen Ross is a guy who had Joe Philbin. Think about Joe Philbin. Think about it. Picture Joe Philbin in your head. The hat, the neck, the whole stature, picking up the gum, the weird cringy meetings with the players in the office on Hard Knocks, him on the sideline looking completely lost, just a weird guy. Stephen Ross had that guy. Stephen Ross had Joe Philbin in his office, face to face. Out of all the people he could have picked to coach, he had Joe Philbin in front of him. Joe Philbin, and he was like, that guy right there. Joe Philbin. That's the best chance. That's the guy I want leading a bunch of young, physical young men on a football team into the trenches, into war, in the locker room. That's the guy, Joe Philbin. He's the one. That's a questionable decision at best. He's also the guy who thought Adam Gase, with his eye rolls and bad attitude and all that crap, was another great guy to lead this team into the future. Stephen Ross seriously is a questionable decision maker at best. And here's the other thing about Stephen Ross. Like, the most successful owners in this league are guys who have like family traditions of owning football teams, who are basically, they know football and they know the NFL. They know how to run a football franchise, like from birth. That's the family business. These guys like Ross, So he has a lot of money in real estate. Okay. So he's just a fan like the rest of us. He's a spectator like the rest of us. Probably knows less than most of us. I played ball as a kid. I got friends that I've been watching my whole life. I'm an avid fan. Most of you, same thing. This guy, I don't know. How much of a fan is he really? How much does he know about the Dolphins? Who knows? He's just a guy with enough money to buy the team. He's not like he didn't have to go through a training thing about being a coach or a player or know the game of football. He just had enough money. He's no different than you or I, except he has more money than we do. So what the hell does he know more than any other regular guy? So he buys the team, doesn't mean he knows what he's doing. And then he's mostly in New York. He flies down there every now and then. He has no clue what he's doing. Fact is, he's a terrible owner because he's clueless about football. But the other thing about him is, I'm sick of hearing all this nonsense about, oh, he's rich, so he must do something right. He runs businesses. He must do something right. You don't know how he got them. Business is a lot of hard work and pushing and talent, but it's also luck. It's being at the right place at the right time, meeting the right people at the right time. And let me tell you something about Ross's business prowess. See, right now I'm looking over there and I'm looking at the New York City skyline. I'm looking at the West Side Midtown. That's what I'm looking at. From my window, I could see New York City, the whole skyline from here. It's behind the mic that way. And he built something called Hudson Yards. Hudson Yards, all this acclaim. But Hudson Yards is a good example of what Stephen Ross is. Hudson Yards got a ton of media articles, ton of newspaper fanfare. It's a big public spectacle. They're two huge buildings. The publicity is all over the place. Stephen Ross is like a rock star when he comes out with this. There's controversy. There's talk of they're redeveloping the West End, which is like all, just industrial and falling apart. He's bringing something there and all this. He's putting this big thing outside, the monument out there. It looks like a beehive, and it's going to be great. Okay. Great. He built them. But let me tell you something that many of you maybe don't know. I've been to Hudson Yards many, many, many times, actually, since it opened. I've been inside Hudson Yards. I've spent a lot of time in Hudson Yards. I know people that live in Hudson Yards. And taking nothing away from them because they're amazing, great people, and it's a very nice place because of the views and whatnot. But let me tell you a little something. There's places in New York City with a ton of character, right? Older buildings, Art Deco buildings. You go in, they have fireplaces in the penthouses. They've got exposed brick on the walls. They've got beautiful paintings. They've got these, antique, solidly built doorways and things. They've got all this character and substance inside them in New York City. Hudson Yards, it's a big public spectacle. It got a lot of fanfare. But Hudson Yards inside is kind of just bland. It's got cool spaces, but it's all bland. It's postmodern. It's quickly done. There's not a lot of character. There's not a lot of substance. But guess what? There's not a ton of people who bought apartments in there because it's so overly priced versus the amenities and lack of character. It's not even sold out. It's kind of a ghost town in there a lot of times. And that's a good analogy for Stephen Ross and how he does things. He's the one who built Hudson Yards. He's the Miami Dolphins guy. There's a lot of glitz and glamour outside Hudson Yards. A lot of glitz and glamour outside the stadium in South Florida. Renovations, and the Super Bowl goes there, and he wanted the orange carpet and all that. A lot of glitz and glamour from the outside, a lot of publicity, a lot of buzz. Tua Tagovailoa, buzz. He wants the orange carpet. Remember Tebow Day? He wants Tebow Day for the Gators. Buzz. Outside fun. But what's missing on the inside? Character, substance. Stephen Ross, whether you're talking about business or football or both, since they're both businesses, Stephen Ross lacks the ability to actually bring that substance. He's all about the outside glitz. So even if you bring his business prowess into it, his business prowess is actually an indictment on how he might run a football team. Maybe he has a great return on investment because of football teams are appreciating in value regardless. Regardless, they're appreciating in value. So it's a good investment. Doesn't mean that he's good at running the substance, that he cares about the inner stability of it. So don't tell me he was great because he ran a business. I don't care how much money he has. Doesn't mean he's good at it, and he's not good at it. And the vessel outside, the thing I was talking about looks like a beehive. It's such a tourist attraction, but guess what? There's been so many suicides. Look it up. So many suicides off the top of that vessel because the planning was bad. The planning didn't take into account that people might go up there and jump. And so they've had to close it and all this other thing because, again, the foresight. He just wanted to build it to get the publicity, but the foresight about how it would actually function wasn't all there. And that's still the problem with the Dolphins. So don't tell me he has a lot of money, so you got to trust him. I don't trust him. Now, we've been out there. We've been interviewing different people and whatnot. And at the end of the day now, we've gotten to a point where we have a list of people that we're interviewing, and I'm not impressed by any of them. I already told you about, Brian Daboll, which I said, look, Brian Daboll, just like a OC could be with Tua and be at the wrong place at the wrong time, not get a job, Brian Daboll's at the right place at the right time. He had Josh Allen. Now he's like a hot candidate. These offensive-minded guys are right in line with what Ross normally does. This Mike McDaniels guy, take a look at him. He might be a genius in the books, but look at him. He looks like Gase Part 2, maybe even a little more nerdy. These are not the guys to run the team. And Ross is going to try to bring in an offensive mind, an offensive coordinator, because he's always been obsessed, because he's wrongfully thinks that's the way to get success in this league. He wrongfully thinks you need an offensive coordinator, offensive mind, to kind of do these X and O's, crazy innovative thing to win. And we've already seen it twice. We're going to see it again if it's an offensive guy. They're going to bring in an offensive guy, and they're going to let the defense crumble, and we're going to get soft again. We're going to be a soft football team again, and it's not going to work out with Tua. And here's the other thing Ross always does. Ross always goes back and forth, right? Remember when Ross told us, he said, I'm finally going to change my philosophy. He said it in a press conference when he did this whole tank thing, when he hired Greer. He said, I am going to change it up for once. I'm going to finally listen to football people. I'm going to put one person in charge of football, and I'm going to let them run the team the way they want, and they're going to succeed or fail on their own merit. He should have given Chris Greer the option to fire Flores or keep Flores. There's no reason he should have stepped in. He said he wasn't going to step in. He said he was going to let Greer do it. But now he stepped in. And he's going right back to what he's always done. Now he fires the coach, but he keeps the GM. So what's going to happen? We've seen it a billion times. It's going to happen again. The coach is going to come in. Coach is going to say, I'll work with Tua. Yeah, wink, wink, nod, nod. He's going to work with Tua for 2 years. And when Tua fails and the team fails, now the coach is going to say, well, I'm not the problem. I came into the situation. You already had Greer and you already had Tua. Let me get my GM in here. Let me get my quarterback in here, and I'll change it. So now we're going to fire the GM and the quarterback and keep the coach. And then the coach is going to bring a new GM and a new quarterback. And then 2 years after that, when it doesn't succeed, that GM is going to say, well, I came in with this coach. Let me hire my coach. They're going to fire the coach and keep the GM. And it's going to keep going on and on and on and on as long as Ross is the owner. So I'm not here to tell you that you should hate your life, not be a Dolphins fan. Look, there have been times in my life where I've tuned out the Dolphins for a little bit because they've been so bad. Most notably, the end of the Philbin era. Remember that? When they beat the Vikings in a meaningless game and all of us knew that Philbin was a failure and all of us knew that beating the Vikings meant absolutely nothing. And then Ross comes right out and says, he's staying, Philbin's staying, he's under contract. And then the next week we get blown out by the Patriots. And then the next year, it's a wasted year because Philbin coaches and he's gone. Ross does this all the time. We see things Ross doesn't because Ross sucks. He sucks. And by the way, from now on all my videos, I'm never going to call him Ross anymore. I'm going to call him Mr. Magoo. Because his name is Mr. Magoo. That's what I'm going to call him. Magoo, Mr. Magoo. I'm not even going to call him Ross anymore. So that's the last time you hear me mention his name. His name is Mr. Magoo. Anyway, he made those promises, but he's going right back to where he started. He's going to bring in an offensive-minded coach. Now, look, Eric Bieniemy, somebody who's respected, or even Peterson. He brings in Peterson. Look, when they hire a coach, I'll do a video on it. And if they bring in Peterson, I'll be excited about it. I'll have some confidence. I still don't have confidence that the quarterback situation is going to work itself out the way it is. I don't. Hopefully my opinion changes. Remember, I was rooting for Tua. I told you in previous videos I was rooting for him, but he just didn't rise to the occasion. That's just me seeing what I saw. Stop. I'm not going to make excuses for what I can plainly see the way some people want to. I'm not going to make excuses for what I can plainly see. Some of you out there are just making excuses for what you can plainly see. So as that plane is crashing into a mountain and you know it's going to go, you're just going to make excuses. Well, we're going to pull up in a second. We're going to pull up. The pilot's great. He's great. Ross told us he's great. We're going to pull up. I'm just like, we're going to die. Doesn't mean I'm not a fan. Doesn't mean I'm not going to stay with you guys through the turmoil. But the truth is, I don't think this is going to end well no matter what you do. I will be encouraged if they get a guy like Peterson or Bieniemy. I will be encouraged. I'm not terribly happy about Dan Quinn. Leslie Frazier, take a flyer. Who cares? We have problems that aren't going to be rectified by the coach. You said there was no problems that weren't going to be rectified by the quarterback. We got problems that are going to be rectified by the coach. And what coach wants to come work for this guy after all the nonsense he's pulled? And what coach is going to come in here and lie to them and say, I can take care of Tua? Because we already saw that there wasn't a lot of interest in Tua when we were trying to trade him. The Texans didn't want him. Other teams didn't want him. The sentiment around the league is that he's okay. He's not that great. So who's going to come in? Probably somebody who's not as good, who doesn't have a lot of other opportunities. So look, if we get a good candidate, I'll be happy. I'll talk to you guys about it. If we don't, if we get a lesser candidate, one of these offensive gurus, quarterback gurus that I don't believe exist anyway, a Daboll, a McDaniel, whatever, get ready for the same stuff we've seen. Get ready for the team to revert right back to where it was under Philbin and Gase, because this is just going to be Philbin and Gase 3.0. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but we'll see. And guys, that's my take on the whole thing. I don't want to get into it anymore. I think they made a clear decision between Tua and Flores. They went with Tua. That's where we are now, and we're going to see what they do. It's hard to get excited, in my opinion, because I thought we were building a culture and building something, and now we're just starting over again, and I don't trust Ross to make the right hire. I just don't. I just think he's not good at this job, Mr. Magoo. So, the plane's crashing, but I'm here with you. I'm next to you in the seat. I'm not driving it. I can't. I wish I could. I'm next to you in the seat just talking to you about what's going on. Guys, please hit the like button. Smash the subscribe button. Once I get to 1,000 subscribers, I can do all kinds of bells and whistles. I can do a lot more live chats. I can have you guys on live. We can do super chats. We can do all these things once I get there. So, let's at least push us to 600 this week if we can, subs. Please smash the subscribe button. If you're in Dolphins groups online, share the video. Share it with your fellow Fins fans. Show some love. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody participating, even the haters. I still appreciate you in the comments, so go ahead and comment and engage. Love you guys. Talk to you very soon. Phin-Addict Fury, still furious. Larry K. I know you heard me on the radio flexing. She loved the sound of my voice. It's the